put it this way. If you saw the schnapps, you wouldn't know I brought them unless you saw them take them out of the bag. But I will let the secret out of the bag. It's my schnapps in the next room. And I hope you'll help me not necessarily finish it off, but make it, put a dent in it after Mincha, because luckily my sister informed me that my grandfather's yard site, Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, but since there were two of them, I wasn't sure which one. She said it's really the 30th of Sivan, which means it was yesterday. So I also have to thank Mordechai that he didn't come in yesterday, even though I would normally feel horrible when I tell me that he didn't come in. But I got to daven from Yamud. And not only that, but then somebody even came up afterwards and complimented me on my davening, which is very rare. But
you hit for the cycle yesterday.
But because of that, I felt it was an extra excuse for my grandfather, hopefully, who his name was Oscar, which is interesting because that already shows how great he was. He already, at birth, he already had an Oscar. And he really was a noble man. If I ever think of nobility, I think of my grandfather as extremely noble.
Paternal or maternal?
He's my father's father, Allah Shalom. And he was born in Romania, but emigrated to Canada just before the First World War. So he brought with him a lot of the nobility of Europe. That's what I felt. And I'll call it the tznius of Europe. That's something Laura Bertram said yesterday, that how much he appreciates that one of the ambassadors today is a woman. And besides that, she always says things that are intelligent and to the point and helps Israel quite a lot. She also dresses tzniusly. That's what Rabbi Bertram was saying yesterday, how much that he noticed that.
She is originally from where?
I don't know.
South Carolina.
No,
South Carolina.
Right, but she's not an American. Her family is not American.
I don't know the answer to that question.
She is partially Indian?
Don't know the answer to that
No,
question.
I think so. She's our representative to the U.S.
It's a type of a Kiddush Hashem. She's not
Nikki
necessarily
Haley.
Jewish, but the way that she supports Israel, the way she conducts herself, definitely part of the interesting thing.
Yeah, you don't see anything but her face.
That's what
There's no
was saying.
skin
How
involved.
much
It's
she
like
noticed
she's not
that.
selling
She's
anything.
always dressed tzniusly.
Correct.
Anyhow, my grandfather was also very much in that respect. Not that men don't have as much of a problem as women, but I remember one time, before I was even religious, I saw him be disturbed by things that disturbed me, because to me, I wasn't aware that there were issues like a boy and a girl kissing on a street corner. To me at the time, that was a beautiful thing, love and all that. And he got very upset. Just the fact that he got upset made a tremendous impression upon me. Like, you never saw anyone getting upset when they saw that. Not in my circle, at least. There was my grandfather getting upset. And there were a few other things that had to do with Yiddishkeit that he got very upset when they weren't carried out properly. And I guess it made an impression upon me eventually. That was probably part of my impetus that helped me look more into Judaism. And I'm sure his zechus, that he supported Jewish causes his whole life, was a tremendous zechus for me and my sister to become religious. So I think in a way it's very apropos to Parshas Korach, because in a sense, even though Korach may have looked like a very noble fellow and probably won over a lot of people because of his skills, his oratory skills, and his money, he had a lot of money. But in a sense, he tore down the human spirit. He caused a rift in Klal Yisrael, which may never have really been healed. Physically tore open the earth to swallow him and his congregation up. And the tremendous gaping hole, as it were, in Klal Yisrael ever since the first real apikoursis, the first real people who said the Torah is not min shamayim. You know, that kind of gaping hole, that tearing asunder the traditions and the nobility, taking the most humble man who ever lived and accusing him of treachery, of lying, and of fooling people, and of grabbing power. That whole, which we see, today. I wrote about it somewhat in our Torah this week, that I think, this is part of what we're still suffering from, the sinas chinam, that we constantly have people tearing each other down publicly. And just this past week, someone called me up from an old kollel I used to be a part of, and said it's falling apart because of the Rosh Kollel got upset, a bunch of people that were doing something he didn't like, and it was all basically machlokas. And it reminded me that this time of year, strangely enough, around Parshas Korach time, a lot of these things start to surface, the hatred and the jealousy and the name-calling, and basically taking the nobility that we all inherently have and tearing it down. So I think my grandfather represented the opposite. And we all need that kind of model, that role model of nobility, because today in our society it's very missing. People dress however they want to dress, if they dress at all, and they do whatever they want to do. There's no such thing as, even marriage is not sacred anymore, really. A man can be born a man and end up being a woman, and everything is like topsy-turvy. And anyone who holds values is made fun of. Like in America today, people don't mind just getting up in front of national television and using an F word to describe the President of the United States for doing what? For doing what he was elected to do. That's how everything's being torn asunder today. And I think that if we don't keep our eyes focused, like we say in baseball, keep your eye on the ball, keep your eyes focused on the people around us who do carry themselves with nobility, it's very hard to keep that nobility ourselves. It happens sometimes in the house. We let out a word that's not a noble word, or it happens perhaps even in davening. We don't treat davening with the respect that it deserves. And not that our generation is the only one. It says, for many generations it's been considered that tefillah is something that stands in the highest levels of the world, and people treat it as if it's completely unimportant. I was talking to my shir today, and it still amazes me that people don't really understand what they're davening. Not that I'm not trying to be condescending. I know what it was like. I remember when I first started out looking at a siddur, thinking, I don't understand one word here. I don't think I'll ever be able to daven in Hebrew. But thank God, eventually you can. But still, not to even understand the davening, and to just keep saying these words, and it is an incredible effort, beautiful for the effort, but in a sense it's not giving the kavod to the tefillah. You're talking to the Melech Malchei Hamlech, you're talking to the most noble of all, the whole creation, the one who created everything, who runs everything, who expects us to treat him like a king of nobility, the King of Kings, and to get up and talk to him as if we're saying something meaningful. I have no idea what we're saying. I don't know anyone else in our life who would stand for that, right? When your wife realizes that you're not really thinking about what you're saying, you suffer, right? Baruch Hashem, she lets you know right away that she's not happy with that. And any other person you have in your life, right? Any Rebbe knows that if a Talmud is not putting his effort into really answering correctly, then you feel like it's a waste of everyone's time. What are you doing here? How does Hashem feel when we get up and daven without even understanding our davening? So, of course, Hashem forgives us for what we can't do if it's completely beyond our ability. But On the other hand, I don't believe it's so far beyond our ability to know what we're davening. Maybe eventually we'll even know it without looking in the siddur, without looking at an English siddur. But till then, we have to. I was telling him, I know I have a good friend who was brought up religiously, but he felt at the age of 14, for whatever reason, he was sent to B'nai Barak. He wasn't fitting in so much in Chutz La'aretz where he was, and his family was close to Rav Shach, as it were, so he didn't mind going up to Rav Shach and asking him. And one day he went up and he said, I don't really understand the davening. Should I stay home and daven with an art scroll siddur, be able to daven at my own pace and really understand the davening, or should I just keep going to shul every day and keeping up with the minyan? He told him, stay home until you understand the davening. Now, I'm not putting out a psak, right? So don't quote me as having said everyone should stay home and not go to shul. But definitely, we should take out from the story, have the art scroll there. Try to understand what you're davening. At least take part of the davening every day and try to work on understanding what you're saying to Hashem, and then each week add to that. Otherwise, it's a little bit discourteous to the King of Kings to be talking to him and not understanding what you're saying, in my opinion. So it's a good place to start, something we do every day. Could be we're not even Yotzi if we don't understand the davening. Maybe the first bracha of Shemona Esrei is more important than all the other brachas. And if you don't, then maybe you're not Yotzi Shemona Esrei, so it could be all the brachas of bracha levatala. I'm not paskining, I'm not a posek, but definitely these things are a bit scary to think of all those davenings that we may not have been Yotzi if we didn't, and how many times I said Kriya Shema without really thinking about the words of Kriya Shema. So it's important to do this, I think, to build up the nobility of everything we do, not to make a joke out of things, not to make fun of things or make fun of people or even criticize people unless you're 100% sure that you're doing l'shem shamayim. The Gemara says that, the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, I spoke about it this week in my Devar Torah, that any machlokas of l'shem shamayim will last, and any machlokas that's not l'shem shamayim won't last. And which is the machlokas of l'shem shamayim? Shammai and Hillel. And which of the machlokas is not l'shem shamayim? Korach v'Hadassah. So one thing we're learning is that we have to try to be l'shem shamayim. We have to try to, if we do have a machlokas, at least it should be l'shem shamayim. But we see how difficult it is. Probably Korach thought he was l'shem shamayim. He seemed to be a noble person. Everyone looked up to him, and he said things that made sense to people, and he was able to rally a huge chalik of Klal Yisrael to back him up, and they all were carrying their pans and hoping they would be Kohen Gadol. And there was a lot of people who were fooled. So how can we make sure that we don't fall into the same problem? Excuse the pun.
I just wondered, who was to tell him that he was wrong? He was probably the titular head of his, he was the oldest one in his clan. He had all the money. Moshe was responsible for everybody. There wasn't anybody, once you're in that out, there's nobody, wants to start a fight with you. So he went along thinking he was right. He was passed over. Why? He didn't understand that he wasn't suitable for the job. There was no one to tell him.
Well, there might have been people who told him. That's not brought down, but certainly by the time it got to when it boiled over, Moshe Rabbeinu was definitely begging him to desist, and he was giving him ample opportunity to back down. But what I was trying to say was that, yes, it's very hard, and I think we're all, to some extent or other, in the position of Torah. We're all in positions where we see things around us we're not happy with. We want to criticize them, and we think we're right. And usually there's no one who can tell us that we're wrong, right? Maybe because they don't have the opportunity before we've already formulated our opinion. A lot of times we already just decide, and then it's already over, because then, someone wants to dissuade me, but I'm already sure of myself. It's very hard. and maybe even I took a step and I said something publicly. Even if I just said something in front of a few people, that's already public. So that's why I did choose this topic to write about in this week's Devar Torah. And what I was trying to say was that a person should try to figure out if he could claim that he was L'Shem Shamayim, but it's very tricky. I'm sure that Korach did think he was L'Shem Shamayim. Okay? So I added another test that you could possibly test yourself, is that it says in another place that Torah learning should be with argument. The Gemara compares learning Torah to having a war. It makes a play on the words oyev and ohein, which are very similar phonetically and even grammatically perhaps. And it seems to say that when you're learning, you should be like oivim. You should be, you can open it. Why not open it? Too noisy?
Well, no, because there was noise, but now there wasn't.
All right.
That's what it means when it's noisy.
Rabbi, I wonder just a
Yeah.
comment on what you said before about the davening.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're mutually exclusive, that you can't go to a minion and translate. You can daven slow.
No, that's what I said.
Skip.
If you heard, at the end I said, I'm not opposed to telling people to stay home and not to come, but I said at least try to make the effort when you do come to davening to have. I noticed that people who don't understand the davening finish before everyone else. How is that possible? Except that that's because they don't understand, so they just say it like a locomotive.
Right.
But that means that if I'm finishing after them and I understand every word, okay? So the easiest explanation I have for why I'm finishing later than them is that I'm thinking about the words and they're not.
Right.
Okay, and I'm not trying to criticize people. I'm just saying, like you're saying, there's an ample opportunity when you come to shul, okay? If I'm able to daven a certain length, then they're able to daven that same length.
No, they can daven less, is what I'm saying.
Daven less? What do you mean?
If they don't understand what the words mean, so they can daven
In
slower.
certain places you can do less, or if you come earlier, you can daven slower,
Right.
right? If you
Or
come
even
earlier,
in the Shemona Esrei, you can daven at your pace,
right?
and then when you hear that the Shliach Tzibor has finished, then you can speed up at the end. But at least you
Okay.
daven some, and over time you'll get
Right.
more and more and more.
Right, I agree. Don't necessarily go to the extreme of have a 5-hour davening, but at least try every day to take a certain part of the siddur and say at least one line of Shemona Esrei or one line of I'm going to know today a little bit better than yesterday.
Right.
Because I'm anyways in shul, and if I do happen to finish before other people, which I would say daven longer and try to think about the words. Look at the English, look at the Hebrew, start to get more familiar with the actual words. Because also a lot of these words come up in the learning. They help our learning. A lot of times I show someone that the word that they're not understanding was in davening. So if they would have learned it in davening, it would help their learning. So, but if they happen to finish before everyone, then they could take that time to go over the meaning of the words also. But you're right. I'm not saying to take the entire thing and try to understand every day, every word. That would be too much. We're not supposed to jump to such a huge degree beyond our level. To go a little bit beyond where you are, which would be a few lines every day, trying to just understand them. You come to shul a few minutes earlier, try to understand a few extra words. You finish Shemona Esrei a few minutes earlier, try to understand a few extra words. And slowly, like Rabbi Akiva said, you make progress with the water making inroads into the rock, so to speak. So, yeah, I agree with you that a person should try to make it a project. That's my main point. Whether you, and I'm not saying to stay home, I think you should come to davening. You should bring an English sitter with you, with an art scroll or a linear or whatever helps you. There's Mitsuda, there's all sorts of ones today. The Malchus, there's all sorts of extra ones today that show you what the words mean. You have to find the one that helps you, that makes it easier for you. If it's while you're davening, that's the best. If it's at least before and after davening, then at least you're making progress each day. That's all I'm saying. So, I think this kind of effort to be more sincere would help us also to recognize when we're criticizing someone and it's not L'Shem Shamayim. Most of us could probably figure out, I think that's why the Mishnah says, who are these people in L'Shem Shamayim, Shammai and Hillel? Who are the ones who are not? Why does it go through those two stages of saying there's a machlok l'shem shamayim that will last, and who are these people? It's a strange thing for the Mishnah to ask, right? Just tell me the rule. Most of the Mishnahs in Pirkei Avos just tell me a rule on three things: the world stands, all these different things, and all of a sudden it's saying, and who are these people who are l'shem shamayim? Why? Because you need a role model to tell you who are l'shem shamayim and who's not. It's very, very hard to really focus properly on your being l'shem shamayim. So if you think, am I being more like Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel right now? Am I telling my wife this thing because I'm a little bit like Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, or a little bit more like Korach? Right? Am I trying to tear someone down, or am I trying to find the truth? That's what Beis Shammai and Hillel were trying to always find the truth. And by the way, the Gemara says a beautiful thing about them, that even though there's a famous machlokas they had in Yibum, whether you're allowed to marry a certain woman, and a very, very strong machlokas in Shammai and Hillel on that, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel on that, it says they still were able to intermarry within that. They didn't like to shun each other. They made marriages with each other, right? In other words, that's the sign that they were l'shem shamayim, that they didn't shun each other because I don't agree with you. Of course, they had to confer about if there was someone they wanted to marry who happened to have relied on the position that they don't agree with. They wouldn't be able to marry them just because they don't agree with the position. But they wouldn't just shun them because they didn't agree with their way of thinking. So this is what we have to think. Am I like Shammai right now, Shammai and Hillel? Am I trying to seek the truth? Would I be written in the Gemara? Would they write me in the Gemara right now for what I'm saying? When I'm calling someone an idiot? Or they probably wouldn't write that in the Gemara. They might write it on the billboard somewhere, right? So that's what we have to think, the first thing. The second thing, it says in the Gemara that like when you argue in Torah, there's supposed to be kind of like an opposition. That's why we learn B'chavrusa. That's why even in our shir, with a lot of argument, Baruch Hashem, it's very good for trying to reach the truth, for trying to ask sincere questions. But the sign that it was really a true seeking of truth is that it says at the end you become Ohavim Zeh b'zeh. That at the end of davening, at the end of learning, do you feel closer to that person? Do you feel like you love that person more? Or you're like, you get up, you go, he doesn't know how to learn, right? Such an Amaretz, right? And that person, how could he ever think? He doesn't know how to think properly, right? Where do you end up at the end of davening? That's a very important Gemara in Kedushin. I wrote it down in my Devar Torah as well, and that's I think another barometer of whether we're doing something l'shem shamayim. I think the two things go together. Right? This is something we have to try to check ourselves. When we criticize someone, we're doing it out of love for that person, or are we doing it to try to tear them down? Right? Korach was trying to tear everyone down, even if he was right that he was more fitting for that job, which he wasn't, obviously. But should he have torn down all that Moshe Rabbeinu had built up just to get himself that position? Does he need to tear everything down that they've built up to now, believing in all the important beliefs and attacking Moshe Rabbeinu's character? Even Moshe Rabbeinu never ever defends his own honor. Suddenly he's saying, I never took one donkey for myself. Right? Where do you see Moshe reacting like that? Anywhere else? This is something that hurt Moshe, hurt him. You know, that they were making aspersions on his character. Even in the face of his sister criticizing himself, he didn't have the same reaction. It says Moshe was the humblest of all men in the world. It didn't faze him the fact that his sister was criticizing him. Hashem had to stand up for his honor. But here Moshe Rabbeinu felt hurt. I didn't take one more for myself. It really hurt him. So this is, I think, one of the things we have to ask ourselves when we want to criticize people around us. Am I trying to seek the truth? Really? Would I be more like Shammai and Hillel right now, or a little bit more like Korach and Hadassah? Am I trying to find the truth, and therefore I love this person for helping me to find that truth, even if he has an opposing view? By having an opposing view, I have to work harder to prove my point, work harder to understand the material, work harder to think about this, and he's helping me, and I appreciate him for being there. Gemara compares chavrusas to two knives sharpening each other up. Gemara says a person learns by himself. He's like It's like a dangerous situation. You learn by yourself. You can make all sorts of mistakes. But when you're learning with somebody, it's like two knives are sharpening each other up. I say something, you say something. It's a sharpening process. Your mind becomes sharper. And therefore, that's what you have to appreciate when you're learning with someone who may be opposing you, maybe doesn't agree with you. That's a good thing. That's a fantastic thing. Just like a woman is created an Ezer Kenegdo. She's an Ezer, but she's also Kenegdo. Both are true at the same time. And even when she's opposing you, she's trying to help you. She's trying to help you reach your potential. So this is what we have to think about during this time. It's the beginning of Tammuz, which is traditionally the heat of the summer. Many things happen at this time that are like related to people getting angry and all of the ensuing problems that causes when we hurt each other through anger, and it ends up in the tablets breaking on Yud Zayin Tammuz. Moshe Rabbeinu broke the Luchos. He saw them doing the Teta Ego, and eventually, at the end of the 3 weeks, we sit and mourn the destruction of the temple, which is when the Meraglim also. It was a very, very tender time. And even in the Chumash, we're reading a lot of the stories about people who did the wrong thing. They left Har Sinai, and all of a sudden they're complaining, and people are dying, and even Miriam HaNaviah is struck with leprosy for criticizing her brother, and you have the Meraglim, you have Korach, you have all these parshas right now, which are very hurtful parshios. And this is a time of the year when we have to be much more sensitive and try to resist the urge to just get hot and angry and criticize other people around us. So I think it's a good opportunity to take this parsha and try to remember the serious mistake of Korach and how, in a sense, he stopped respecting the nobility of Moshe Rabbeinu and the nobility of the Jewish people, even though, like all politicians, he spoke the opposite. He said, oh, we're all kadosh, and therefore you don't deserve to rule over us, as if he's trying to respect the kedusha of Klal Yisrael. But it's just the opposite. Like Moshe Rabbeinu said, there's rules and regulations, just like in the world, there's certain limitations. The sun comes up in a certain place and sets in a certain place, and you can't reverse these things. It's the way that Hashem set up the world. We have to respect these things. We have to respect limitations. We have to respect people's position. And I'll end with a story that I heard of Rav Steinman. This is still a year to be maspid as much as we can, to try to learn from his incredible midos. I think Rav Steinman, in a sense, was the opposite of a Korach. He was the most humble person, I think, in our generation, except maybe Rav Shach. But since Rav Shach and Rav Eliashu were nifter, he was the gadol. Today, we're a little bit bereft. I don't know if we have a person today that we all feel is like the gadol ador. But I don't remember anyone who ever asked for such little to be done at his funeral, right? They shouldn't say very much. They should do it quickly, not write anything too much on his, right? Very, very humble man, very humble man. And if anybody ever went if anybody had the schmooz of ever going to him, they would, again, it's important to try to seek out the gedolim. This makes an impression upon you. I remember the one time I went in to see him, I think that one other time I went in when there was a davening going on. The one time I went in when he was actually sitting on this little bed, on the side of the bed, just reading a sefer on the side of his bed. It was like the most simple image that I think anyone could ever have of a person sitting and learning Torah, mamish, on the edge of his bed, not even in a regular chair, not even at a desk, not even with a stender. And they didn't even notice I was there till, I didn't even know what to do. Should I cough? Should I do something? He's the gadol ador. What should I do? To try to get his attention. But very humble man, and any story that I've ever heard about him was always the most simple, beautiful story, not some flamboyant thing that, shook the world. He was a very, very simple man in many respects. but through that simplicity, through that, I think, is the nobility. This story, I think, shows how great he was on a very simple level, and how, in the end, because of that greatness, he affected someone very, very significantly. There was a person who, unfortunately, went off the derech of Yiddishkeit. I guess he was like a teenager or something, and then in his early 20s, and he left home, and he ended up living with somebody who was also not keeping the Torah properly. And when this person wanted to marry a shiksa, his roommate, who was also not keeping the Torah, but apparently had a certain level above where this guy was holding, felt this is wrong. To intermarry was wrong, that he knew. So, but he couldn't really get him to, didn't feel he could convince him not to, but one thing he felt he could do was, he encouraged him to go home and tell his parents in person what he was about to do. That he felt there was a certain respect that he owed his parents. And that he agreed to, which is amazing enough, because when he went back, he spent the Shabbos at home, but he did not keep Shabbos. He was smoking cigarettes, I don't know if he was in the house, outside the house, or whatever, listening to this, listening to that. He was not keeping Shabbos. So you would think, okay, what's going to come out of that? Not very much, right? And still, Baruch Hashem, his father did at least the minimal amount, apparently, and he invited him to come to a shir that he usually goes to on Shabbos, and it happened to be Rav Shteinman's shir. And this boy, surprise, surprise, accepted the invitation with his father to go to the shir of Rav Shteinman, which later they asked him why. Why did you agree to go to the shir? And it turns out that going to that shir was a very momentous point for him, because someone explained to Rav Shteinman where this boy was holding, and Rav Shteinman said a very interesting thing. And this part I had actually heard before, but this past week I read another rendition of this story, which included another part, which I'm going to say in a minute. But the first part I had already heard earlier, that he asked him, during the time when he was, like, how many years have you been not keeping Torah? He said 2 years. He said, in those 2 years, did you ever think of doing tshuva? He said, yes. He said, how many times? He said, 4 times he thought to do tshuva. And each time, how long did you think, did that thought last? He said, 10 minutes. So Rav Shteinman said to him, I'm very jealous of you for those 40 minutes of pure, sincere thought of doing tshuva. In other words, and most people would just look at a guy like, he couldn't even keep Shabbos when he came back home. And here Shaiman's focusing on that purity, that beauty of the Jewish neshama that shone through. And he was trying to get the bacher to focus on that and to identify that and to realize what a precious thing he had there. And that the Gadol Ador was even jealous of him. And that's a beautiful way to get someone to change, is to show them that they have a certain goodness that they've even exemplified, that they just have to get back to that and to shine the diamond they already have, as it were. So he eventually did tshuva. He eventually did not marry the goy, did not marry, came back to Yiddishkeit. But the last part is even more moving, because it says, why did he agree to come? He wasn't holding by anything. Not even his own house wasn't keeping Shabbos. So they asked him, why did you agree to come to the shir of Rav Shteinman? He said, because he had a very good feeling about Rav Shteinman from when he was a very little boy. That he was learning in the Cheder, and the Rebbe took the whole class to Rav Shteinman to be fair, to test them on their learning. And the Rebbe had even asked Rav Shteinman to, stupid down the questions, make them simple, keep it simple, stupid, right? So he asked simple questions, and everybody who got the question right got a candy. And this boy who we're talking about, who was the one who later went off the derech, he got it wrong. He got his question wrong. He did not get a candy. And so Rav Shteiner made it more simple. Asked him another question. Still got it wrong. Asked him a third time, even more simple, and the third time he got it wrong. So he didn't get a candy. As the class was leaving, Rav Shteiner called the boy over. He said, "The Torah is not a Torah of results. The Torah is a Torah of effort. Hashem rewards us for our effort, not for our results." And therefore, he said, each boy who got a candy, when I asked him a question, he tried to answer and he got it right. So I gave him a candy for that effort. He said, but you tried 3 times to answer the question. So you get 3 candies for 3 times trying to answer a question. And he said he remembered that years later, that good feeling that Rav Shteiner had given him. And that's why he agreed to go. So when we think of the little things that we do to affect the people around us, treat them with nobility, and to treat them with respect, and to treat them and to focus on the part of them that's the good part, and that's the neshama part, as their true self, and to look at them as not an adversary, but as we're partners in this venture. And he felt that he can go hear the shir of Rav Shteiner. He was not holding by anything, and that's what saved this boy completely from intermarrying, and brought him back to Yiddishkeit. So this is what we have to concentrate: the nobility of the human being, the nobility of every Jew, the nobility of course, our rabbanim, and other people. We have a chiyuv to respect our wives. We have a chiyuv to respect our wives, and our rabbeim, and other people around us, of course. And therefore, it's a good time to concentrate, not to be like Korach v'Adaso, but to be more like Shammai and Hillel, that no matter how harsh the argument, that we still loved each other, and respected each other, and married each other's families, and this is the kind of machlokus that lasts, that will bring us, Bezrat Hashem, to Mashiach.
Amen. Yasher Koach.